Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 283 Brazil, and opening up the main card, we have Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction. And I've already done a bunch of UFC 283 prediction videos. I will link those all down in the description if you want to go check them out after this. And I'll also be doing a live post-fight immediately following the fights on Saturday, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss that. So this is a fight, when it was initially announced, I really didn't think it had all that much relevance within the light heavyweight division. But then after the last month or so, the division's kind of been tossed on its head. You have Yuri Prochazka is going to be out for a year. You have Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill fighting for the belt, obviously in the main event at UFC 283. Magomed Ankalaev, Jan Blachowicz just fought each other. They're going to be out for a while. They had that draw. Alexander Rakic coming off an injury. Anthony Smith coming off an injury. You have Nikita Krylov, who Paul Craig recently defeated. Johnny Walker has a loss to a while ago. And then you get to Paul Craig at number 9, Volkan Ozdemir at number 10. Eventually you get to Johnny Walker at number 12. And as crazy as it sounds, I don't think Paul Craig and Johnny Walker are that far off from a potential title shot, depending on how this division shakes out, because whoever wins on Saturday, who are they going to fight next? My guesses would be Magomed Ankalaev, but if he's not ready to go, I mean, Jan Blachowicz probably isn't getting it. Rakic coming off a loss and injury. Anthony Smith coming off a loss and injury. Glover Teixeira or Jamal Hill will have just lost. Yuri Prochazka is out for a while. Paul Craig has a win over not only Jamal Hill, but he also has a win over Magomed Ankalaev. So as crazy as it sounds, and I think Johnny Walker in his case is a little bit less likely, but if a month ago I told you at UFC 283 we were going to get Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill for the light heavyweight title, you would have thought I was crazy, So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is a fight that could be of massive consequence within the light heavyweight division in the next 6 months to a year, depending on how some of the pieces within the light heavyweight division moves. So this is a very important fight for both guys. I'm not saying that Craig or Walker is going to get a title shot. I'm just saying when you look at it from a certain perspective, next thing you know, Glover or Jamal wins and maybe Magomed Ankalaev's injured. You look at the rest of the division, it's not looking that great with Yuri Prochazka potentially out for you. That's all I'm saying. Makes the fight a little bit more important. And then on top of that, stylistically, this is a very intriguing fight. You have Paul Craig. We know what he wants to do. He wants to get you down and submit you. Johnny Walker, he's a dynamic, big, athletic striker. He wants to go out there and look for the KO. So I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup. I think it's going to be a very exciting matchup for as long as it lasts. And I think it could have some implications on the division, which always makes me more excited for a fight. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, Paul Craig is 16-5-1. Johnny Walker is 19-7. You have Paul Craig ranked number 9. Johnny Walker ranked number 12 in the UFC official rankings. Craig is 35. Walker is 30. Craig is 6'3". Walker is 6'6". Craig has a 76-inch reach. Walker has an 82-inch reach. So a 3-inch reach advantage or a 3-inch height advantage for Johnny Walker and a 6-inch reach advantage for Johnny Walker. So if you look at Johnny Walker, of his 19 wins, 15 by knockout, 3 by submission, 1 by decision. Of his 7 losses, he's been knocked out 4 times, lost once via submission, and 2 via decision. His last fight was against Ion Cutelaba. What does that really mean? I mean, that was at UFC 279, September 2022. He submits him in the first round. Ion Cutelaba at this point in time, he's barely UFC caliber. And then before that, he got brutally KO'd by Jamal Hill. He lost a fight against Thiago Santos where all he did was feint the entire time. He fought Ryan Spann where he got the KO, but he was hurt in that fight. The fight before that, he lost a unanimous decision to Nikita Krylov, which hasn't aged terribly. Nikita Krylov's kind of having a career resurgence. And then the fight before that was a fight against Corey Anderson at UFC 244, where if Johnny Walker had won that fight, he would have probably been very close to a title shot because, if you're a newer fan in the last year and a half or so, you may not remember when Johnny Walker came into the UFC, he had crazy KO wins over Khalil Roundtree, Justin Ledet, and Misha Cirkunov. And people were saying, this is the guy to beat Jon Jones, even though none of those names are elite competition, just because he done it in such impressive fashion and so dynamic. People were saying, this guy's huge. He has a long reach. He's 6'6". He's going to be the guy to be a threat to Jon Jones in the light heavyweight title. Obviously, it didn't happen. Corey Anderson KO'd him. And, you know, you look at his record right now, out of his last 6 fights, he's lost 4 of them. And his only 2 wins are against Ian Cutelaba and Ryan Spann. Now, that Ryan Spann win has aged pretty well, but at the same time, you know, I don't think it's the greatest win. But Johnny Walker, still an exciting fighter within the light heavyweight division, but still really looking for that signature win. He really doesn't have a good win in the division. You look at Paul Craig. Paul Craig is such an interesting fighter. 16 wins, 3 by knockout, 13 by submission, 5 losses, 3 by knockout, 1 by submission, and 1 by decision. His last fight was against Volkan Ozdemir back in July of 2022. Unable to get him down, and Volkan Ozdemir basically outstruck him for the entire fight. Before that, he was on a 4-fight winning streak. He submitted Nikita Krylov via triangle choke. He defeated Jamal Hill. This was technically a TKO, but it was also kind of a submission. He dislocated Jamal Hill's elbow, had him in a triangle position. The arm was flopping around like crazy. The ref didn't stop it, even though he should have. And then Paul Craig just started smashing him while Jamal Hill was trapped in the guard, and eventually gets the TKO. And he just pulled guard. He just pulled guard in the first round. That's how he got Jamal Hill in this situation. And Jamal Hill didn't have the sense of urgency to try to get out of Paul Craig's guard. Before that, he beat Mauricio Shogun Rua. It doesn't really mean that much. And he doesn't really have any really great wins on his resume outside of Jamal Hill. And as well as you go back to March of 2018, I mentioned it earlier in the video, he has a win over Magomed Ankalaev. He submitted him via triangle choke in the 3rd round. And this is just how dangerous Paul Craig is. Magomed Ankalaev won the majority of this fight. Ankalaev makes a mistake, goes into Paul Craig's guard, and gets submitted at the tail end of the 3rd round. I think it was like the last second of the 3rd round. And it's crazy because Magomed Ankalaev is at the top of the division. Jamal Hill's now fighting for a title. I think the winner of the main event is going to fight probably Magomed Ankalaev for the title, depending on Yuri's return timeline, if it changes or not. So you look at Paul Craig's resume, and he's been here since, 2016. Even though he's trading wins and losses, he had the 1 4-fight win streak, but again, not against the greatest competition outside of Jamal Hill. He has 2 massive signature wins on his resume that really means something in the grand scheme of the division right now. And he's a specialist, he looks for submissions. And I just think it's very interesting because if he goes out there and gets an impressive win over Johnny Walker, I think he puts himself right back in that discussion. So how do I see this fight playing out? Again, this is grappler versus striker matchup. Paul Craig is going to go out there and do everything in his power to try to get Johnny Walker to engage with him on the ground. He will pull guard. He will shoot on sloppy takedowns. He will use his hands to try to set up takedowns. Johnny Walker, he knows what Paul Craig wants to do. He knows that Paul Craig wants to come out, take him down, and submit him. And Paul Craig has a massive advantage. I mean, you look at his wins. Of his 16 pro MMA wins, 13 via submission. So basically, every single time Paul Craig wins, he wins via submission. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. And, Paul Craig's going to have a massive advantage. And I think in this fight, if Paul Craig wins this fight, I believe he wins via submission. For Johnny Walker, he has a massive edge on the feet. Paul Craig, he's one of the last few guys in mixed martial arts where he hasn't really evolved a well-rounded skill set. He has some okay striking, but Johnny Walker, even though Johnny Walker isn't considered like the best striker ever, Johnny Walker is leaps and bounds better in terms of the striking ability over Paul Craig. So whoever's able to implement their game plan in this fight is going to win this fight. And I do believe the most likely path to victory for Paul Craig is submission. The most likely path to victory for Johnny Walker is KO and TKO. And I do believe that this fight ends in the 1st round. And I am going to go, for my official prediction, I am going to go Johnny Walker 1st round KO. I just think Paul Craig, he just leaves a lot to be desired on the feet. The takedowns aren't great. And yeah, he mixes in some interesting ways. He'll pull guard. He'll just link up with you in a clinch and kind of get an overhook and really wrench on that elbow and pull you down into his guard and then start looking to set up arm bars and triangles. And it's super dangerous when you're down there. But if you look at Johnny Walker, he's super athletic. He's very fast. He's very powerful. He has a height and reach advantage and a massive reach advantage. And the way he strikes, he naturally keeps his arms low. So he's already in a position to shut down the takedowns of Paul Craig. And Paul Craig doesn't have particularly explosive takedowns to begin with. So I really think Paul Craig's going to have to catch Johnny Walker slipping. Maybe Johnny Walker throws a dynamic strike, slips, and ends up on the mat. Next thing you know, Paul Craig jumps on top of him. I do believe if Paul Craig gets Johnny Walker down there, I think he will be able to finish him via submission. But I just think Johnny Walker knows what Paul Craig wants to do. I think he's going to be careful, but I think the striking differential, the skill difference between the two of them is going to be too massive. And I think Johnny Walker catches, I'm going to say, a flying knee. I think Johnny Walker is going to start getting comfortable. I think Paul Craig's going to be shooting and shooting and shooting. His knees are going to be skinned up from attempts. And I think the late first round, Johnny Walker's going to get a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more crazy, a little bit more dynamic with the striking. And I think Paul Craig is going to shoot in on a sloppy takedown. At the same time, Johnny Walker is going to throw a flying knee. And I think Paul Craig is going to be brutally KO'd in the first round. I think he has to get him to the ground. I think he has to. And I think because he's going to be spamming those takedowns, it leaves him, in a certain sense, very predictable. And I think Johnny Walker, after he strikes with him a little bit, after he gets a vibe for Paul Craig's timing and his tendencies, I think he's going to find that opening, whether it's the flying knee or something else. He's going to find that opening, and I think he's going to brutally KO Paul Craig. I do also think Johnny Walker could win a decision similar to what Volkan Ozdemir did in his last fight against Paul Craig, where he just basically stuffs the takedowns and outstrikes him and really beats him up. But I just think with the power of Johnny Walker, with the reach and height advantage, and the fact that Johnny Walker just throws everything with tremendous power, he throws everything to knock you out, I just think it is inevitable that Paul Craig is going to get caught coming in, looking for one of those sloppy takedowns, and I really think that Johnny Walker sleeps him at the tail end, I'll say in the last minute of the first round. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Who are you picking, Paul Craig or Johnny Walker, and how? Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.